All right, you guys ready?
Yeah.
All right. Let me just load up what we did yesterday. All right. So I know yesterday's lecture was a little confusing. This whole data provider idea is it's a lot to comprehend when you first look at it, but you'll get used to it. But for now, I want you guys to get up to speed with it and start. Today's just gonna be mostly problem solving. Um, let me just delete this for now. And obviously you'll see an error, but I want you to get up to speed such that you're entering everything. So it's fresh in memory. I know it was just yesterday, but now's the best time to retain it. Just to get ready for this week's homework. In addition to the Pokemon stuff, we're still going to continue adding on to this repo. Code base regardless. So the more you delay the Pokemon stuff, the more this is going to pile on. So this might be your last week to really, get a grip on Pokemon. Ish is already ahead of it, so I don't want him to but I still want you guys to be aligned. So, make sure to, go full steam ahead, because this is the time where we're learning stuff where that's actually going to be in the interviews at this point. And the Pokemon project, I know it seems like far out right now, but it's to really have that object-oriented mind, which you need for this type of stuff to be successful. You need to work on those meaningless side projects. But that's all I have to say for that. Up to you guys if you want to complete it. But so we got the login test, and just do what we did yesterday, and I'll provide hints. I know that it was a lot to take, this method, but start coding. All I want is all these usernames to your test case, which should be in your login test, which you should have already done. The input username, password, click login button, but it should basically run those test cases and enter it into the fields and log in. But don't stay silent if you're not sure what to do. I'll help right away. I know it was a lot yesterday to take, but I'll start you off with this.
So wait, what are we doing?
So you're logging. I just want a quick way such that you see this login scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Using that data provider annotation object, I want you to be able to run through the login test with. Let me just delete all this so you guys can have somewhat of a challenge. So basically what would happen is if I were to run this, it would enter all these usernames into the login field, username field, password field, and go through login, right? That's it. And for now, you could have the data provider right here, and you could call it what you want. We'll still call it DP method. I'll delete it from here for now. Right. So however much you remember, just kind of think back to it, but have at it. And I'll put little hints here and there. I don't expect you to remember all of it, of course, but try your best. That's the only way to really get this stuff. But if you're completely lost, call it out. I don't mind at all.
I'm a little lost, but I'm gonna try it first.
Yeah, that's fine. Like, look at this stuff. Think of it like this, right? Don't just charge into it blindly. Let me just don't charge into it blindly, right? I don't want you to just make blind guesses. Obviously, like look at the material I'm giving you. Like, I'm not providing you with a completely blank plate, right? Clearly you remember this data provider method. Clearly you see it's returning a sort of object, right? So your body has to return some sort of object. But you also know you have to feed this in somehow, right? So try to kind of recollect what you remember. Try your best.
Okay.
P method. At the, where you put data provider, how do you name the you gotta give it a name, right?
Yeah. So I put some hints out there. See if you can find them. So look at the filter test I put up.
Yeah, I see that.
Right. So that's referring to a data provider, right?
Yeah.
Right. And if you have like a partial idea of the syntax, and not the complete one, just type it out. Like I don't care if it's wrong and it throws errors. Just try your best. Doesn't matter. How's it going? You guys are ready, or
A little bit longer.
all right? Okay. All right. I think that's enough time. You guys good? Or
I got.
no, it's fine as long as there's some progress. But we'll walk through it. Ish and Fa, how are you guys doing?
I feel like I did it right, but I'm getting an error when I
Okay,
run it.
that's fine. Before we even look into each of your screens, it might be a good idea to do it on mine. So obviously, I don't want. The best way to learn this type of stuff is to understand it partially and then look for clues and then solve it that way. Like you won't go anywhere by looking at the videos. Really, it's more or less a waste of time. So I put the videos up there in case you guys need to review. But the best way to learn it is to try to hack at it with little information available. So these are the few hints I gave you. The login test, you're already aware how that works alone. If you Maven test this, it'll run. But clearly, there's a few red highlights. It's missing something. Our input username expects a string to be passed. Regularly, what do? We put it up here, right, into here. Like so. What I mean, let me highlight what I mean. I don't like rehashing the point, but it's good to see what I mean. Right, and this would technically work at that point. This is how we were used to doing it. We created a login test, and this is how we're used to doing it. But obviously, we don't want to pollute our classes, so we looked for an alternate route. So instead of me guiding you guys through it, guide me here as to your method of thinking of how to approach this, or help me slowly fill it in.
Okay.
The provider needs a name, but like I don't know the syntax of how
Right.
to
So
name.
okay, that's fine. That's a great place to start. Data provider. Just off basic recollection, you remember this tag needs a name, right? So, to kind of help you solve that, I gave you the filter test we did, but I kept the annotation there, which is data provider annotation, right? And this leads to what? Another kind of data provider, right?
Yeah.
Right. So we probably call that data provider this generic data, right?
Yeah.
So if data provider belongs to this test annotation, what do you think the data provider parameter is? In other words, this I don't want to give the answer, but the parameter value we have for test, what do you think the parameter value for data provider would be?
Generic data.
Say again?
Generic data.
So remember we labeled it,
Name.
right? Yeah. So Ish, what'd you say?
I said a name.
Right. Oh, that was you, bro? Yeah.
Name.
Yeah.
Oh.
It was that. It's just small little things like that. You might remember, you might not. This is the best way to do it. All right. So guide me from there.
Name generic data or whatever you want to name it.
Let's call it something else. Let's just call it data for now. Okay. So we got that part resolved.
Now you have to return something.
Yeah. So it kind of gives you a clue what you're returning, right?
Oh, username, password.
Yeah, I mean username, password, right? But remember, it's a whole data structure before it. It's a double array, right? So what's the syntax for a double array?
Oh, the brackets, 2 brackets.
Right, but tell me what to type.
Open. Can you just do 2 open close brackets?
I can, but what I'm trying to get at is anytime you have this kind of notation, right? You're returning something, right? You gotta almost explicitly specify it, right? So yeah, you're right. I'll eventually get to that. But first of all, just put that, like just because it's telling you what to return, right?
So why do you have to put object?
You gotta specify. Okay, let me think of a good example for it. See what we did before. So it's just like this. Not to get into it too much, but basically one of the solutions for the Pokemon project, well, the way I was handling it, was anytime, like, so for instance, let me go to the execute class. Right, so Bulbasaur is just like any other class. If I instantiate it right here, right, and at a certain point, you're gonna get to a solution where not only are you returning integers or something like that, you want to return a class, right? So for instance, if I wanted to get the evolved form of this, I made it in a way where I could just do this, get evo, right? And to prove myself that an Ivysaur was returned, well, let me import it. Oh, I'd have to put abstract. I gotta change that around. Let me see if this works. Okay, yeah. So the basic idea is at times you might find the need to return an object, and basically I'm not returning the the null object itself right now. This has nothing to it, but this is telling the compiler yeah, I'm returning an object, but it has a double arrays. But don't get too into it. Let me X this out. This is just kind of the syntax you got to get used to. Like if it's telling you to return something, you're usually going to specify here what it's going to return. So it's like that string example we had, right? Like, okay, this is just to check if it works, but just like we went over yesterday, like a string, you could return a string by itself, right? A string name equals whatever, name, right? You could return the name, and that'll be an error because this is not a string in itself. This is a double array of string. What's a double array? We went over it yesterday. We were saying that, yeah, you could have a string name equals this, but you could also have a double array of strings. Right? So like this. Right, and it's similar syntax here, because all it's saying is don't remember the reason. Don't forget the reason why I put it like this, right? Just like a double array. Imagine like a box where you have like a vertical column and a horizontal column, right? And this would be the vertical column 0, right, and then 1 2, or 0 1, 1 0, right? So in a similar vein like this, how would I structure this? So that would be your hint right here.
One for usernames and one for password.
Right. So I do want you to like specify it. So just like you could literally type out the exact same thing I did here, except you could replace it with objects. What I mean by that is let's call it data, and let's call it a double array. Right. There's nothing wrong with this. You don't see any errors here. This is just another form of an object. Right? And just like we specified what we did here, we can do the exact same thing right here. Look, just to prove it to you. So username, password. We'll put username 1, password 1, and then we'll put Oh, my bad. Right? So it's not really anything different. I could have done it this way, and I could have put username 2 here, password 2. Right? There's no trickery here. Like, let me comment this out. So all this is saying is just the way the data provider, the designers had it, is like, for whatever their function is, they're saying, all right, create this function, but make sure you could use it, you could annotate it, but make sure whatever you put, it throws an object, right? And here I said string, but what it's better to throw is the actual object data structure. Fill in the arrays, right? So when you throw it to the data provider, it parses through it. So basically it goes like 0. Okay, this first value I'm assuming is, whatever, the parameter here is, and then second, and then, go to the next line. That's just how it uses it. So in light of that, what do I have remaining to do?
You have to pass over an array.
How do I do that?
In the parentheses next to DP method.
Can you be a little more specific? So let's look over what is DP. What's the problem with it right now? What is it? What is it saying the problem is?
This method must return a result of type string. So you have to return.
I could return what?
String.
String, but I have a data, right? So let me move this around, because not to confuse you. All right, now what do I return? There's just one more step here.
You type in return. Return object.
Like this.
Return no.
Could be return data.
Yeah. See, nothing, right? I think you guys got kind of mixed up with the syntax, but this should look very familiar to you. Like this exact thing is equivalent to me doing this. And I probably should have done it this way, because this is what you're much more familiar with. So this is the same thing as this. Alright, you won't see any errors here. It's the same thing as this, except we just decided to lock this up and put it in the variable first, and then we return the variable. Well, the pointer to it. Okay, so we got that. And that's probably the hardest part of it, to wrap your head around that. Because really, always look back to what you're familiar with. Like, just like you had a... Well, let me even comment it a bit. Just like you did a list, right? And here, you screwed around with generics, don't worry about that. But just like how you had a list, and you created a new, array list. Let me import that, just as an example. This looks different only because we're using arrays, but it's essentially the same things. Like, let me even show you. It's just a different way of doing things. So this is one way of doing it, but we could have done it like this. So we'll do the same thing. Give me a second. What's the error here? Yeah, I don't use arrays a lot, but the idea is, I just forgot the syntax here. This is just what I'm familiar with, but it's just the point. The point being that it works in a similar fashion of how you instantiated the list. So let me delete that one to confuse you. This, just get used to this notation. It's just how you construct a double array. Think of it as like 0, and then this 1, and this, right? And then you return the data. So I know that was kind of a bit much to get used to, but let's return back to what we have. Okay, anything else we're missing? Okay. Anything else? So I still see a
You
few
have
errors.
to. Are you running the one above the data provider?
Yeah, so I just want this to run.
So then you'll have the data provider set to that one.
Right, just like we did in filter test right here. Just have a reference to it, right? And you give it the string value. Okay. Anything else? We're almost done.
You have to give it parameters. The login test one,
Right. Which is what?
username and password.
Yep. Okay.
This is exactly what I did, but like I'm getting errors. This is exactly what it
We'll
looks
see.
like.
We'll revisit yours. Let me just put the correct standard user secret sauce. We'll use problem user and secret sauce. Okay. Yeah, Ish, we'll get you to your problem in a bit. For now, let's just complete this. Is there anything else missing, or are we good? If I hit run, will this work, is what I'm saying. Well, let's put it like this. If I hit run, what's going to happen? Well, what should happen? What are we expecting?
They will log in.
Yeah, but I mean, keep going. It's going to do a little more than that, but what is it?
Gonna log in twice.
Right, why?
It's gonna use both logins.
Right, it's going to use this data, right? If we were to delete this, what would happen?
Log in once.
Right, so that's just the nature of the data provider class. Like, that's just what it does. It sees a dual, double array with multiple rows. It's gonna go through and exhaust each of the rows, right? Yep, that's correct. Okay, let me see. Yep.
What does it put? So what is it gonna put in the username field, in the password field?
So notice that I specifically put, like, for each row, right? I put a username and like that's the way the pattern is, right? So basically what it does is it looks through the data field, and first it goes by row, by row. So first it goes to row 0, and then it sees, all right, 2 fields, right? So whatever this is feeding into, it should accept 2 parameters. Like, let's see what happens if we put third parameter. Actually, let's do that. Yeah, let's do that in the first go, and then we'll see. But let me see. Let me see if this should run. I think everything looks good. I didn't change anything else. Okay, let's run it, and I'll show you what I just did there in a bit. All right, so I got a failure too. Is this the? Yeah, I mean that's expected, right? So let's see what happens when we delete the parameter. So it looks like it's running for me-ish. Yep, it ran twice, just like Fa predicted. But yeah, did you see what happened when I pushed in the third parameter?
No, try to do it again.
Yeah, let me do it one more time. So let me run it and pay attention because right now I fed it a third parameter when it's expecting 2. Well, I should say like each function that's expecting to get fed the data from this object right here, because of how it behaves, it's expecting to get 2 parameters, right? But we're trying to see what happens if one of the rows, even just one, contains 1 extra parameter, of which this is not expecting because parameter-wise, it's only expecting username and password or whatever the fields are in the first 2 cells. So let's hit run. So right there, it just it stops you right away from even going down to the next field. Basically, you use the data provider class how it was not intended. Despite having specified 2 parameters here, you put in a third one, and this is great actually because it stops you in your tracks, right? What will be really bad is if it lets you keep running, and imagine putting an overnight execution, right, and then not realizing you had a problem until the very next day, which happens all the time. But few libraries are very they look out for that, and they have these little exceptions they throw right away. So basically what happened, as soon as it detected this extra parameter, it just stopped it right there, threw an error so you could see it. And like when I saw that method matcher exception, I knew right away, like, all right, method, this is a method matcher, all right, let me match whatever, the data provider and the method. And you don't have to know completely what it is, but if you keep going down this list, you'll basically have a basic idea. But that's a stack trace, and that's something you guys will learn later as you progress in your careers. You were saying something? Ben, did you say something?
So
and it even gives you a little brief message right here, data provider mismatch, so you could see for yourself. What do you think? Are you good for it?
when I try to run it, like when I do the Maven test, it gives me an error.
Okay, well we'll check yours, but for now on my screen, did it make sense? We'll debug your code in a bit.
Okay.
But you got the point here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, moving on. Let me delete this third parameter. So now we officially got the login test working. But now I want the filter test to do the same thing. Like I actually didn't code in what sort products does. It's blank right here. But nonetheless, just to give it that distinction between itself and login test, I just put this in. Let me delete this. And all right, how do I feed these same values into filter test? Say again?
Are we supposed to copy down filter test?
No, for now, just pay attention. All this is gonna be up.
Okay.
So now I want filter test to borrow from the same data provider class. How do I do it? Or what's the most efficient way to do it? Any ideas?
You have to put it in hooks.
Why?
Because where it is right now, only login test has access to it.
Right.
But
It's in
if,
scope of the login test, even though it extended from hooks. So you're saying put it in hooks. Fob Berm, does that make sense? Why he'd want to put it in hooks?
Wait, what are we putting in hooks?
Who asked that?
Berm.
Oh, Berm.
What
All
is putting in hooks? He said.
Right, so my main question in the beginning was, all right, now I want the filter test, right here. Let me cross this out. So I got only two tests, really, login test and filter test, right, to clear things up. So login test, we just saw it borrowed from this data provider just fine. Now the problem is I want the filter test to do it, right? I don't want to, well, I could copy and paste it, but now imagine if I had 50 more different test cases, right? I don't want to copy paste this data provider class to the 50 other test cases. So what's the quickest way to do it based on how we have the test structured so far?
Put it in the base page.
Well, the base page is right here.
Hooks page.
Huh?
Hooks page.
Yeah, why?
So that because it extends from the hooks page.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we got that part. We know to copy this and paste it somewhere. The order doesn't matter. I just chose to put it here. Okay, anything else to do? I mean, what I mean is, if I were to run this, these test scenarios, would it, if I were to hit Maven test, would it run both test cases in the login test and filter test?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, at the filter test. Oh wait.
Or I should put it like this. If I were to run it, given how I set the parameters, if each test case is just you logging in and, you know, closing the browser, and if that's considered one test case, how many of those test cases are going to run in total if I were to hit Maven test right now? So you know how in the beginning the browser opened and closed for each user data? How many times would that happen if I were to run a successful case of this?
Do you have do you have the input username and your input password as separate tests?
So obviously for every test you need to log in like we went over yesterday, right? So just to differentiate the filter test, I just put sort product. So just, you know, humor me for now. So assume this is a, you know, whatever, this is its own test scenario. So my question is simple, really. It's just saying how many test cases are going to be run if I were to hit Maven test right now. Assuming that every data input is a separate test case, right? So if I were to put standard user and secret sauce in the first scenario, and it were to log in, do its thing, and, you know, close the browser, that's considered one test case. I'm asking you, if I were to run these tests right now, how many of those scenarios would occur? Well, I should put it this way. First, when we did login tests, when the data provider class was right here, how many of those test cases ran?
2 of them.
2 of them, right? But now I took that. So Fa would have had the right answer for that. Two scenarios would have run. Why, Fa?
Those 2 sets.
Because there were, yeah, right, 2 sets of test data, right? Now all I did was whatever this was extending from, I just had to, you know, copy paste, you know, cut this out and put it in the data provider class. Right now, if I were to run it, how many test cases would happen?
2.
Why?
There's still 2 sets of data.
Right.
And not really specifying which one to use.
What do you mean specifying?
there's there's still two sets of data in the, I don't know what to call that.
Right. Okay. Let's run it and see what happens. Let me. Yeah, this is what I want you guys to like kind of figure it out yourself. So basically, if this runs twice, phi is right. Okay. Let's see what happens. All right, so that's once. And you can't see it, but it came right here for some reason. So that's twice. All right, so it ran twice, build failure for whatever. I don't care about that. Don't worry. Let me see what just happened. Okay, so there's a separate failure. I'm gonna tell you why that is. But by that metric, phi is right? But in that it ran twice, he's right. But why is he still wrong based on what we assumed would happen? Since this extends, well, what else extends from hooks? We say log and test extends from hooks, right? What else? Huh?
After method?
Say again?
After method?
No, forget about that. That's all fine. That's in the hooks, right? That's all safely tucked away here. That's all happening as expected, right? You saw it start up the browser and you saw it quit the browser. But what else is extending from hooks is the question. Outside log and test. It's right there on the screen. So log and test. Say again.
Am I missing something?
No. I think you guys are peering too into it. This is a simple answer. So log and test is extending from hooks, right?
Yeah.
What other class is extending from hooks?
Filter test.
Right, filter test. That's also extending from hooks, right? So my question is, if log and test is extending from hooks, and before we saw when we had the data provider here, it iterated through both rows, right? So that's two test cases. Why didn't the filter test iterate through both as well? It's extending from the same hooks class. Right, so technically the right answer would have been 4 test cases, right? Because one, log and test would iterate through both fields, but then filter test should have done the same, right? There shouldn't be anything stopping the filter test from iterating.
Data provider for the filter test is named generic data.
Right, exactly. It's just little things like that that I want you guys to pay attention to. Like that's why you got that error in the first place. Let's read the error. Fail test, and it gives you a stack trace here. See, it tells you right here. Data provider is named generic data, right? And that's the problem. And it didn't. Not only did it not bother running it, it just told you like this is wrong, change it, because there's no reference to this anywhere, right? They don't know that a data provider is called data at that step because you didn't specify it. So let's see what happens when we ran it. So in this scenario, if I were to run it. So that's 1. Not sure where the second one comes in my second screen. All right, that's 2. That's 3. And that's 4. Right, and you saw first the login test iterated through both fields or both rows, went through the username and password, and then it quit. So that's 2 test cases, and then the filter test took it, right? And then you could clearly see like from now on, anytime you make like let's say you made a separate test case, and just to show you the utility of this, using very because we built this out already, we don't need to keep rehashing it. Like if I were to make a another set of test cases. Like I'll let you guys decide. What do you want to call this? What else do you want to test? And I'm talking basic functionality. Don't think of individual thing, you know, like individual pages. I want you to think of functionality. So the filter test we already know is going to encompass all this, but is there anything else in the website that you want to? Any ideas?
Say it again.
So, you know, we got the login tests, right? That would go through each of the usernames, make sure you could log in. I know you guys didn't complete that just yet, but that's going to be the homework. And then we have the filter tests, which makes sense because this in itself is its own set of functions, right? So we got that. Those are major high-level functionalities of the web app, right? What other functionalities of the web app do you think we still have to test? I mean, this is e-commerce, right?
Does it have to be this page, or
Say again?
does it have to be this specific page?
No, like, I'm saying based on what you already know of this app, the saucedemo.com, what else do we have to test? Think very high level. Don't think the pages. Just think what do you want to call this class that should encompass all these test cases you want to test. I mean, run through it and just think of something. It's going to be pretty obvious.
Adding to cart?
Yeah, adding to cart, that works. But maybe we could make it even more high level.
Adding, removing from cart?
No,
Cart.
Say again?
Just cart.
No, don't think like you could do that. Like, let me not say that. You could do that, but think even higher level than that. Like, what's the point of the cart?
To check out.
Right. And what do you call what do you want to call it? Like, you could say checkout, right? But what I'm trying to get at is you could just call it payment test, right? And you know, payment test comes with its own set of things to take care of, right? Like you gotta all this, and you finish, right? So that's something we haven't even began testing yet. So in the future, if you want to make a test case or a test suite for payments, you would do something like this: payments test, extends it from hooks, public void payment test 1. And all I'm literally doing is just copy pasting. Add test, enabled equals true, data provider equals data. Right? So indulge me for a second. Well, don't indulge me. I'm saying, like, so you guys see the utility of it, right? Like if I were to create a test case here, run end to end, meaning what I mean by end to end is to be able to log in, to be able to, you know, put the password in, log in. This website doesn't have a direct way to pay for like something like this, so you'd have to go to add to cart, click this, checkout, you know, enter your information, go to the checkout page, right? If I were to just add one test case here, so let's say you put in that test case using your expats and everything, you put in that test case here, how many times would this run? I'm asking you.
How that function run?
Yeah, I mean, how many? Yeah, right. How many times this function would run, and how many test cases would run?
2.
Right, 2, because this again extends from hooks, right? And you have this whole like idea now. I mean, not an idea, but like you have this whole extension that resolves this whole problem of having to enter the same data multiple times. That's not even something you got to worry about anymore, right? It goes back to that, you know, kind of reducing your workload aspect to it. So you code your test case here and then just leave it be, right? And let your data provider class take care of all the data. If you ever want to add data, you leave this alone because you still need this data, but you just keep adding to it, right? And based on however much you add to it, well, let me put the actual, let me go back and log out so you can see all the data. So not only do I have this now, or let me even show it to you like this. We got the problem user. Let's do the locked out user. So now assuming, okay, so now this is right. So now assume I made a test case here. If I were to let it run as a suite, that means the login test, payment test, and the filter test, how many test cases would run in total?
What's it? 4. This page.
So assume I typed all this out already.
12 times?
Right, exactly. Right. So you see the utility of this, right? I simply plugged in data for this, and all of a sudden, I went from like just doing 2 test cases. Now simply by extending from the hooks class, adding a few parameters, I'm suddenly up to 12. Right. So this is kind of the mentality I want you guys to get into. Like do more with less. 12 test cases. Once you see how simple it is just by changing, plugging and chugging here, you realize how teams could have like a 2,000 test case or something like that, or let's not say 2,000, let's say even 500, right? 12 is still nowhere close to that, but you could see how some work and effort into it could expand it up to 500. It's like it's insane, but yeah, that covers kind of pretty much most of it. You guys did good, all those. I'm just gonna add a few more concepts, but pay close attention to it because I'm expecting you to continue adding it to your framework. But until then, this was just a quick review. Do you guys have any questions? Anything that's kind of unfamiliar, but that you want to go over? But this should have kind of covered it, I think.
No, I think once you upload the videos, I'm just gonna go through it again. And
yeah, of course. Yeah.
Better
But
understanding.
no questions for now.
No, for now.
Okay. Yeah. All right. One thing I want you guys all to do to make your lives easier. If you look at here, I got these little tags for myself. Like if I were to want to run this, look what I could do. I wouldn't even have to run Maven. I could just run this. So say I just wanted to run this login test method. I'm gonna run this. And
How'd you do that?
Yeah, I'll show you just now. That's the utility of you. Like remember when run 2 times, right? So that's the utility of keeping these nice and neat. So anytime you tag it, this background plugin would recognize it. Let me see what. Yeah, 4 times, right? Because there's 4 sets of data. So let me just wait for this one to run out. All right, close that out. And it's done. 4 tests. Okay. All right. So go to help while your Eclipse is up, and go to the Eclipse marketplace. And everyone should do this.
Wait, we go to. Okay, hold on.
Yeah. Now let me know when you're on this.
How'd you get there?
So making sure Eclipse is foregrounded, click help and go down to Eclipse marketplace and click that. So basically what this does is a lot of times you might want to enhance your workflow, and anytime you do that to any other app, you just add plugins to it. Just like Google Chrome has extensions, this is pretty much the same thing, except it's called plugins. So look up, I don't know why it's not showing this full, but type in testng and hit enter. And then you'll see this, testng for Eclipse. I already installed it, but you guys should see like a non-disabled button. And once it says it's installed, once it asks you to install like it does here, just click it.
So testng is part of Maven, right?
So testng is its own thing. Testng, all that is just a dependency we plugged in. Just like it's like basically what you're asking is Selenium a part of Maven or Java, right? All Maven does is it helps you pull in that dependency easily, right? That's all it does. You remember how we did it, right? We just went to their Maven repository, right? Let me highlight it again. right? We went to the repository. They had testng. All we had to do because of Maven, we just copy pasted it and then pulled in all the requirements of testng, right? They're called jar files, and they just download it all for you.
Okay.
So have you guys downloaded the plugin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Run through it, set it up, and then just close out your Eclipse and open it back up.
Yeah, I did it.
Okay. Are you seeing this?
Yeah, I see the running.
Oh, you see it now, right? Okay, that's a signifier of it being successful now. How about the rest of you?
Hold on, opening up Eclipse. Yeah, I see it.
Okay, cool.
It's cool. So now you could wait. What happens if you click it? It just runs that portion of the code.
Yeah, whatever you have annotated, if you hit run, right? Remember, it's still extending from hooks, so all of this is still gonna, all of this is still gonna be run, but this specific test case, it'll run this if you just hit run over it. So if you want to experiment with it a bit, I'll let you, but we'll move on to the next thing if you guys are ready. So now what you can do, well, let me not get into that just yet. The next thing I want you to do, right click on your project, go to new, and go to other, and click that. And among the options you'll see in this wizard, go to XML, and you'll see this option, and double click that. And then it'll ask you what to call it. It should already be in your project folder because that's the one you originally selected. For the name of the file, type testng. So it should be testng.xml.
So you right click new other, then what?
Let me go back. So new other, and then you see this XML folder, right?
Wait, so what is this?
Let me go back for a second. So I went to the project folder, right? I right clicked it, and I scrolled over to new, and then I went down to other. You should see that option, right?
Yeah.
Right. Click that, and you'll be led to a wizard. That's what this box is called. And then one of the folder options is XML file, and that's directly under the XML folder.
Yep.
Right? So you just double click that, and they'll lead you to the screen where you just get to name it. And when you name it, it's important you call it testng. Are we good so far?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now you can just finish, and you'll see a testng.xml file right here. Let me bring this up. So let me close everything else, just hone in on it. Let me click on this. All right. So let me give you the early starting tags so you can begin to see the purpose of this. So just type it exactly what I type, and I'll show you what it does. So the thing about this XML file is it autocomplete. So my first tag is, say again?
When I open my testng.xml file, it doesn't look like that.
You should click source on the
yeah.
right above console.
Right here, you see source. You're on design.
Right.
You see this now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So just bear with me. I'm gonna put a few starting tags. But if you guys have ever seen like how HTML looks, HTML is just it's in the same vein of this. Like how you guys saw HTML here. I mean, you should be familiar with it. So if I inspected this page, you'll start to see that the way we use tags here, we're gonna start using in this XML file. And let me just populate it first so you kind of see it for me. So just type what I type for now, and then I'll explain each. And it'll be just a few tags. And once you put the right bracket, it'll auto-complete this, so don't worry.
never seen HTML, by the way.
That's fine. Not a big. You don't need it for this.
So that's something you learn in school.
Oh no, you can just pick it up yourself. But it's not really important. You saw HTML here briefly. It's not enough to really know it, but you don't need to. You don't need to know it. Not important for automation. Okay, so this is all I typed. Just make sure it looks like this. So after you do that, first we're gonna name this bracket. We're gonna name it, let's call it demo suite. This you could call anything you want, but I'm just calling it demo suite. And we also have to name test. So let's call it test suite. Or sorry, demo test. So these are just the only tags that where the parameter is mandatory. So just keep that in mind. You won't get it now, but it's something you'll just drill into your head. Okay. And now under class, give it a name. But for this, it's fully dependent on where you put your test case. So what I mean by that is, in this part, at this point, the name of your package is important, right? Because we all started. We all started the same. We started the basic Maven project, right? They gave us the path directory leading up to it. What I mean by that is if I open this up, let me see why it's not letting me open it up. Let me bring that over here. So now I'm just going to open this up just to show this to you by, so this is me in the project folder, right? Let me minimize it a bit. And you see the same things you'll see here technically, right? It's just that you see source main Java, source main resources, source test Java. So clearly it begins at the source class. But look, the testng file we created is in the root directory, right? Which we just created, so it's here now. In the pond.xml, you see there. But this is the way this was automatically created for us, if you remember. If you go to source, you'll see all this. Source main, source test, right? And we put it in source test, source test Java, source test Java. And this is the part where we got to, actually call our package whatever we wanted. Let me X this out. So, I mean, for you guys, I don't know what you put. I think you originally put test runner, but I switched to test cases. But that's ultimately up to you. But look at what I'm about to do now. I'm going to put test cases dot login test. So yours should be whatever this package is right here, and then it should be dot and the class name of your test class. Is everyone with me so far?
Hold on. So class name. So our name should be whatever we name the class.
Right. So look at how it's structured. You got source test Java. That's the main directory leading up to it, right? So yeah, ultimately, let's say you wanted to run the login test, right? Because this is predictive, like they already know this path, source test Java. You don't have to do this, is what I mean. You don't have to do this. You don't have to go from the root directory and do this source test Java. You don't have to do this, but I'm pretty sure it gives you the same answer. The point is, because Maven has a structured way of doing things, it expects you to have this flow, right? Remember, Maven created this for us when we went through it. It created the hierarchical folders for it. We had our hand in these two folders, right? So instead of putting source test Java, you could exit that out because it knows where to expect it. All it's saying is, all right, I know where your I know where your page object pack. I mean, I know where you decided to put the folders. Just tell me what you want it run. That's what I need finding. So to do that, you just specify the package, which is test cases. For me, it's test case, and I put dot, and then I put login test. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for you guys, what was it? Was it test cases or something else?
Yeah, same thing.
Okay. So now that you do that, right click on the testng.xml file, go to run as, and this you wouldn't have noticed before we downloaded the plugin. But now that we did download it, let me lower down the amount of data so it does not run. Let's see, so it runs once. Or let me not do that. Let me comment it out. Alright, so I got one data set. And because I specified here, I just wanted one login test. I'm good with this XML. So now what I could do, I could right click this. I go down to run as, and I just hit testng suite. And then hit run. So now it's running without me having to run Maven test. And it should ideally just run through one scenario. It should quit. And that's that. Say again?
Save the testng and then we run it?
Yeah, so in order to run it, you right click it, right?
Okay.
You right click it, you go down to run as, and this option right here saying testng suite, it wasn't there before, but because we have the plugin for us right now, we have this option. So all you need to do to run right now, you just hit it once. And then it does it all for you. You don't have to do the Maven test, you don't have to pull up the terminal, you just have to do that.
So what is the? Oh, you're saying it's just a faster way to do it?
It's an alternative, but before you before we get to the actual utility, we're just gonna populate it first, so you end up seeing what the purpose of it is. So yeah, for now it's optional, but the point is, imagine you had like 30 test cases classes right here, right? And you're not completely sure. You remember how we had I had that problem. You guys saw it happen directly, where I wasn't sure what I enabled, what I disabled, but despite what I remember yesterday there was like a 7-minute delay where I was just trying to find what's running when I couldn't see it, right? I kept running through the classes just as I'm doing right now, and I just couldn't find it for whatever reason. It kept running. That's because we did it this way, which is fine because that's how you start out. But once you have more test cases, imagine I had 50 test cases and for whatever reason the test suite kept running. Imagine how difficult that would be to resolve, because I had to keep cycling through the test cases. So at the very least, it's good to have just one file telling you specifically what's running. So right now we saw the login test run, right? So someone help me complete. Now I want the filter test to run.
You just put another class?
Yeah. So the same exact thing.
That run both classes then?
Say again?
That if you put 2, that would run both classes, right?
Right, exactly. Well, let's see if it does. Might hit a bug, you never know. So again, and the thing about this is if you run testng suite like this once, you can just hit run and then it'll do it. So you guys try that too, because it's a part of the run configuration now. So hover over it first and tell me what this tooltip tells you. It should say run testng.xml.
Oh, okay.
Well, did you run it first yet? You have to have run it for it to work.
Yeah, run test.
I ran that first time.
So, Fi, you saw the tooltip, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now put in this second class. I'll let you some time to do that, and just hit run. So for me, let's see if it runs twice,
But
which is
my filter test isn't configured yet, like the login test. So
okay.
I'm gonna have
Fair enough.
Yeah, my test is all over the place.
Okay, that's fine. Let's see if it works for me then. So that's one test case, and that's 2. So right away you see this. Let me just let that finish up. So now that's 2 test cases, right? And not only that, because of this plugin, it gives you this new little feature right here. If you click it, you get a much more neater, bird's eye view of what just went on, right? So demo suite, demo test. I'll go over how you could broaden your horizons with this in a bit. But the point is, it tells you exactly how it run, right? And it tells you how it failed. It tells you which data it took in, right? And it told you how long it took. This is actually the very bare bones of the test reports you're going to use, but as a very lower level thing, this could get you kind of far, right? Okay.
So wait, to run it, do you need to first have it enabled equals true?
No, No.
Your filter test?
No. So that's what I was trying to get at, right? So this supersedes anything you put in the actual test, and I'm glad you mentioned it because look, let's see what I put in here. Let's say let's even give that a direct demo, and I'm glad you brought that up actually. So let's say I had login test. No, actually, I think you might be right, but let me make sure.
Mine had an error, but let me try to change it to true. Let's see if it works.
Yeah, let me actually see. So I actually think this does supersede it, but let me no, if you enable it in a specific. So actually, let me see. Let me run it. No, you're right. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure there's a way to supersede it. It's not coming to me right now, but we'll get to it in a bit. So right now, just assume you didn't falsify everything. And let's put the
Yeah, I put like 3 classes or whatever in the XML file, and then later on I just want to run one. Do I always have to keep deleting, or is there a way
No,
or do I like comment it out? Or
right, for one you could comment it out, right? At the very high level you could comment it out, and to do that I just hit command thing / It should be right next to your shift button.
Okay,
Right?
got it.
You could do that, but let me show you a more direct way of doing things. So now type this. So I typed in groups, type in run, and for now, let me pull up filter test. So yeah, to go back to Berm, the thing he noticed, it's usually best practice not to put this enable tag, specifically because what we went through. Because there are better ways to filter out for what you want to enable and disable. It involves a bit more work, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But it's usually not a great idea to put enabled here. That's just a very low level feature. When you have a few test cases to keep up with, yeah, it's fine. But once you have a lot, that's when it becomes a problem. And this exact example will address that. So let me put an include tag here, but for this, remember to close it. You don't need this extra. Well, forget that for now. So as you go down your suite and you make it bigger and bigger, right? There becomes a necessity to start tagging the test case. What I mean by that is sometimes you'll want to run a few test cases for like a smoke test is what they call it. And what a smoke test is I'll put it in the Teams chat. So what a smoke test is something you want to run every day just to make sure the app is always working, functioning. It's like those are going to be the very high level test cases. It's not going to go nitty gritty, but let's say you had a banking app. You're always going to want to make sure that your customer can pay his bills, he can change his bank account number, stuff like that, right? Very, very high level stuff. A regression test, where a smoke test suite will be like, it could be like 50 test cases. A regression test will be much more. It'll be like 250, right? Because you want to cover the whole app, but obviously this takes a lot of time, so this is not something you want to run every day. This is gonna happen anytime you want to deploy the app into the app store, right? You want to make sure all bases are covered, right? But this is something like this you want to cover every day. So just keep that in mind while I introduce the next idea behind it. So let's say this filter test we were creating right here. It's very it's not too important, like. And you could kind of understand, like, your users might not use the filter functionality too often, right? Whatever. So you wanna there are more annotations here, not more annotations, more parameters that you could assign. Just give me a second. So at that point, you want to group the test cases, and how you do it is you literally say groups, right? and groups is a parameter that takes in an array, right? An array of strings specifically. So just like before, this is when you can give a lot more human readability to your test cases. So just like I said before, I'm going to group this, since it's a filter test, I'm going to call it regression, just to tell myself that, all right, this is important, but it's not something I really care about every day. What I really care about every day is to make sure my user could log in. I want this to be running 24/7, right? So in order to group that, I can call it smoke, because it expects a string, right? So that way, going back to this is the new tag I could introduce. So let's say it's release season and you're trying to release the app. In that case, you're going to want to do regression scenarios, right? So instead of going back to go back to imagine 50 test cases, like always assume the worst case, like 50 test cases here. Because of this XML file, I don't have to do all that. But remember one thing, the classes, you always want to do it in one shot. Like if you had 50 test case classes, you want to put them all here. That's for in order for this to work. So do this and never change it, just leave it as is. Basically, this is dependent on whatever's here for it to work. So let's assume it's regression season, or regression point of the sprint. This is another tag you should kind of keep in your bucket. Give me a second. Just like the other tags, it takes a name, and what do you think I put in here?
Well,
well, yeah, you get the idea. It's regression because I'm assuming it's regression season. So let's say regression. And it has this habit of putting this. I've always done it this way. Hang on. Sorry. You can do it this way because this isn't requiring a closing tag. The reason is it's not. This is like the lowest level you can get. But I'm pretty sure you can put a closing tag. But for now, just assume it's this. What I mean by closing tag is right here, right? It's not. It does this automatically. We can see for now if it works. But for now, let me just do it this way. So now, if I were to hit run, what should this run? Which test case?
It'll still run both.
Why?
Well, you still have test cases that login test and test cases that filter test up there.
Right, but in this case, I specified specifically regression, right? And I call this smoke, and I call this regression.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's one filter
right,
test.
right, exactly. It's a simple question. So let's only run it. Failures. Why? Give me a second. Oh, there's one thing I forgot to mention. So I'm not sure if it's bad design or a bug, but it is one of those caveats you got to remember. So since I'm specifying specifically, I'm going down to the nitty gritty of so basically since I included regression here, it's gonna search out this specific test case, right? The problem here is it's gonna try to run this exact signature right here, right? But as we saw, so you see a no pointer exception here, but basically what that means is it's not the driver it's using within these methods. So right when it goes to input username and it tries to input the driver, it doesn't see the driver because it never got instantiated. Because once you do this, don't ask me why. I haven't really researched it myself. It doesn't go through the the before method and after method. So just as a caveat, just remember once you start running these group cases, you have to parameterize the before method and after method. And the specific parameter you got to use is always run, just to tell it that anytime. Let me just type it out. And after method. Right? So in this case, it's reminding it that, all right, you got these group test cases, but remember these before methods and after methods, it extends from to always make sure it runs, right? Otherwise, the driver never gets instantiated, right? And like when it tries to input the username, once it references driver, it doesn't have anything to go by, right? Because it never used the before method. It jumps straight to this. This is a small thing to remember. Not a huge. Well, it is a huge deal because it'll stop you, but just try to keep that in mind. So let me hit run now. And we didn't have any signifiers to tell if it was a filter test or login test that ran, but let's see the results. So
Can
here,
you that one more time? What you did to make it work?
yeah, sure. So basically, I want you to know the reasoning behind it, right? So for whatever reason, I'm not completely sure about the reason, but as soon as I included groups, right? As soon as I included groups, it honed in on these specific method signatures, right? That we grouped as regression or smoke. In this case, it was regression. So as soon as it targeted this test case, which was tagged with the regression, it tried to run only this. But as we know, there's a driver component to keep track of, right? And that only happens in the hooks class, right? And basically it skipped over this method, it skipped over this method, right? So in order to alleviate that, we just made sure it knew the existence of it, and the way to do that is just to keep this in mind. And your before and after method, just parameterize it with always run equals true and equals true, and then you won't have a problem anymore. Right?
Okay, I get it.
Right. Okay, so we hit run, but to make sure it ran filter test and not login test. Obviously there's no exact signifier here, so I went down to the results, and you can see demo suite, test cases, filter test 1, and standard user. So now let's try smoke, and let's make sure that works by itself. So if I hit run, let it do its thing, let it end, go over, and now you see that it picked the login test, right? Just by a simple change of parameters.
Did you do always run equals true at the data provider too?
No, I didn't. So that's the you don't have to do anything to that. This could keep as is, yeah.
Okay.
It's just the before and after method. Like the specific reason, I could look into it for you guys, but just keep it in mind for now. All right. So we got that. So now we saw, just by shifting this around, the login test and smoke test ran respectively. And from here on out, don't use the enable tag, because that apparently supersedes it. It eluded me because I don't use it. But there you have it. What else? Okay. So there's another tag called exclude. And what I mean by that is, all right, since it takes an array, this is clearly, for logging in, this is not something I just want to test for every smoke test, right? I also want to test it during regression. I always want to test it, right? So in order to do that, what do you guys think I do to this? Remember, it's an array of strings, so what else could it accept? So now what I'm asking you is, I want this login test to run for smoke test and regression test. So how do I do that?
Can you just do group?
Remember, this is an array of strings. So what can I do with arrays? Don't overthink it.
What did you say is the array of strings?
Yeah, so this structure right here, what I'm highlighting, it's an array, right? An array that accepts strings, right? And I'm asking you, I want this login test not only to encompass smoke tests, but regression tests as well. So how do I do that?
Oh, you do comma.
Right, exactly. Right? I just put in regressions. Very simple. So now quickly let's see if it runs for both smoke and regression. So in this case, let me run it. Okay, it ran once. What's going to happen if I do this? How many test cases are going to run?
What did you do?
So all I did, I changed the value from smoke to regression. How many test cases are going to run?
How many do you have in the hooks class? You only have two? Two or...
No, I reduced the data amount to just one set. Yeah.
Okay, twice.
Why?
Well, it's gonna run filter test once and login test once.
Yep. Let's see it in action. That's once. And that's twice. Right? So that's direct utility right there. And just to verify, always look at your results. And yeah, you saw login test happen once and filter test happen once. Now, there's one more tag. What if I put this? What do you think is going to happen? Or how many test cases are going to run?
Three.
What makes you say that? Remember,
So
I mean, look at this tag. I
it's-
put exclude instead of include, right? Just so you're aware.
Oh, okay. So then only once.
Why?
Because it's excluding anything that has smoke in it. Like it's like any group smoke. So it wouldn't run the login test.
Right. It will only run the filter test, right? Let's see if it works. Right, so let's see it. And yep, the filter test, right? So even though that this tag contains this tag contains regression, right? The way if at any point you were like, all right, this could have been I mean, login is not a good example because that's extremely important. But if it were something else, actually it would make more sense to no, let's just leave it. Let's say for whatever reason, like maybe you just really didn't need to test login. Fi, you said something?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay. Right. So for example, this works as like an AND statement, right? Even though this says regression, because now you're saying exclude smoke, it cancels it out, right? Even though it says regression, because you excluded smoke, this doesn't pair up well, right? This negates it. So now this takes this out of the equation. It just runs this. So just get used to working around that. And let me just put one more idea. And I'm not even going to run this. I'd prefer you guys to experiment with it. So far, let me put this back into let's say let's just say regression for now. So just get used to using the XML file directly and not change this around too much unless you need it, and group up all your test cases based on however you want to execute them. For now, we put smoke and regression, but maybe if however it pertains to the homework, do it that way. However it helps you. Just one thing. So far, you guys haven't really been verifying your test cases. I mean, clearly I haven't taught you how. So what I mean by that is you log in, right? as a secret sauce. Yeah, you logged in, but your test cases doesn't really know you logged in. Like, you click this button, but you could be getting a login error that you're not aware of, right? Your test hasn't, validated that. How do you think you validate it? How do you validate that the login scenario is successful? I should say. So suppose I logged in, right? At this point, I could say it's a success, but what if I logged in, right? Or I should say, what if I didn't know this user was locked out, right? And technically, I'm following the exact same test cases in here. Input username, so I inputted that username. Input password, I inputted password. Log in, I click login button. If I were to just run this would be successful. This would show it as a success. Why? Because it followed everything. Technically, it followed to a T. It inputted the username and password and clicked the login button. But there's nothing really specifying if that login actually worked, right? If you were to look through a sheet of 100 test cases, you would glaze your eyes over this because this shows it as a success, right? And to illustrate that, even let's put it this way. Let me just show it to you in action. Let's go back to the hooks class, and instead of standard user, let me comment that out, and let me bring back in locked out user. I mean, in the real world, you'll never get to this username, obviously. Like, you'll never know which username is being locked out, right? So let's run this now. So everything is good. Yes, regression. Let me just put smoke because that's for the login test. All right. Let me hit run. So it did that. And now let's look. 0 failures. If I click over that, there's nothing here, right? All the tests technically succeeded because it followed the exact same test cases. It says passed right here. So clearly there's a step missing, right? So in order to do that, maybe a simple approach would be to log in, right, as you regularly would. Now I'm using the acceptable username. I log in. And what do you think? Like, what could I do at this page?
You could have it like verify, like if something is
right,
like
exactly, anything, technically anything, pretty much anything here. Like, you could validate if product 1 is here, product 2 is here, and if that happens, for all intents and purposes, that's enough for our test cases, to see that it worked, right? So I'll let you guys kind of figure that one out, but this is how you would go about doing it. Give me a second. So I suggest doing this for now, like off the bat. So let me expand this and type this in. Import org.testng.assert.
Well, let's type that in.
Yeah. Make sure to make it one of the imports. So after you do that, right, now you could begin using this function. So assert, hence assert, dot assert. You see all of these options, right? But don't worry about too much. They're pretty much all, they have their own variations of it, but what I'm most interested in is assert equals. So assert equals. So this takes many parameters, right? But for our purposes, a string would work. What I mean by that is the following. So when this value is what's expected, right? So what do you think an expected string is that I could put in here? Based on, don't think about code, just right here.
Sauce Labs backpack?
Yeah, exactly. Anything here pretty much, right? So if you want to go off that, that's fine. Usually it's better to not go off the specific products because you're validating a page and these objects can change. So what do you think a better option is?
Products?
Products, right? Because this is a header for the page, so it'll always be here. So what do you think you could do? I mean, how would you go about this problem? You want to extract? Yeah, go ahead.
I've verified that.
Yeah. So basically, let's inspect it, right? And do it in a, try to make it like very, make it neat. Like try not to break this pattern, but you know, since it's your first foray into it, don't worry too much about it. What I mean by that is obviously this product's text still belongs to the product page, right? So if you take the XPath first, which I'll do right now, it's a span class equals title. I'm pretty sure this alone will work. Let me see if I have my, yeah. So let me try it right here. Span, add class equals title. Yeah, so it just selects one out. So that's perfect. That's a perfect XPath. So this takes it. You could take the text from it, and just make sure, right? I could put it right here. Products, right? So this is what's it's expecting. And if I hover over it, you can see string. No, sorry, reverse that. So basically, I'd put what I'm expecting here. Products. And in here, if you look over, the actual is what you put in. And actually, this doesn't, I guess actually the order doesn't matter because ultimately it's seeing if the two items are equal. So what I could do here, and don't do it this way because it's not too, you know, like, it kind of breaks this pattern because you're referencing to the driver. Up to, like, I want to see how you guys go about this, like, without breaking it. But obviously what you do is as soon as you're in the login page, right, you get the text, and as long as this passes, you pass the test, but not before then, right? This has to have passed. So what this does, this specific method, it comes from the testng package itself, right? So if this fails, you don't have to do anything else because this throws the failure to this test annotation, and then it fails it for you. But unless you guys don't have any questions, I'll leave it here. I'll leave it open-ended. But your next homework, I'll just put it out right now, is just to start completing this. Like, let me see. So I have the payment test, which basically just involves what I'd want from the payments test is to run through whatever you know, product you want, and just run through a successful payment. What I mean by that is obviously you guys saw you add to cart, and you know, you go through the cart. This also has that XPath. Go check out, do all of that, and you know, make sure that make it a test case around that, and also finish up the remaining filter test case scenario. So I only had you do A to Z. You should be a lot more comfortable with it now. So such that if I hit filter, I can do price low to high now and price high to low. Put that all in your filter test. Outside of that, make sure you still maintain the data provider annotation such that you use all the pieces of data. So roughly, assuming that, well, you're going to have like 12 test cases, right? Because we already went through it. So just complete your framework, and then we're going to keep adding to it. And utilize the testng file. Call it whatever you want for now. You could call it a regression test, or do it in a way where you could do it like this even if you want. Like if you'd rather launch it this way. Payments. Right, you could do because now it's as simple as like commenting this out and letting this, but then again, this takes care of it. So up to you. So just experiment with it. But do you guys have any questions, or does the assignment look clear?
I got one question. The data provider,
Yeah.
the name you give the data provider, that matters, right? Like you call that data, so wherever you call upon it with the name data, it knows it's good. Because what if you have multiple data providers?
Right, so if I had multiple data providers, I could do just the same. So if you want, I could do this. obviously based on it's still Java based at the end, right? That's why it's throwing that error. So I could call this DP method 1, and I could call this DP method 2, right? And because I'm referencing specific strings, I don't have to worry about this dependency anywhere else besides here, right? So if I wanted to use data 1 for this, I could reference this. Remember, it's still extended from hooks, right? And if I wanted to change the data 2, it's as simply as changing that.
So why? So when you put data 1, how come it doesn't give you an error? Because there's no, you don't have a data provider that has that name.
What do you mean?
So
Like this?
in the log, yeah, if you change that name to something else, completely different, whatever.
Right. No, I get what you're saying. So you got to remember, despite all these plugins we're adding in, right? All these extra features we're adding in, at the base level, this is still Java, right? And if you put Java does it in compile time, right? In compile time, it doesn't care about what you put in the string, right? That's testng's that's testng's domain, and testng only cares about what happens in runtime. In compile time, meaning what we're doing right now, Java is not going to track it, but if I run this, that's what I mean by runtime. That's when testng kicks in and starts saying, all right, your strings aren't matching, let me throw an error. Does that make sense? And Java only cares about yeah.
If you were to run this, which data provider would it take the data from?
What do you think?
And I have an error. It's not
Yeah, exactly. So let's actually run it, and thanks to this plugin, I could just do this.
Okay.
Errors not right away because testng at that point kicks in, and then it tries to find a match. When it doesn't, it gives you a very specific testng exception, not anything Java related, is based on the library. And it tells you specifically, it requires data provider name data1. This requires a data provider name data1, and it couldn't find it, and it gives you that error, right? But because I mentioned, let me, now if I put this here, if I run now, it matches it, right? Because now it's in compile time. I mean, now it's in runtime. Now it's actually testng kicks into gear. And now it tracks this, right? And that's pretty much it.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. And look, actually now we just saw the assert equals thing in action. Clearly an empty string is not equal to a full string of products, right? So now look here. Now you got that failure. That failure ticker pops up, right? Where before it passed. So instead of it expecting an empty string here, what you would probably want to do is, extract whatever item is here, which happens to be product, and make sure it matches. And that's that. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if your homework, complete this. Fully use all the features you've learned. Look over our videos, and complete the test cases for payments. Complete it for filter as well. And try your best to keep up the page object model. Don't break it. And just like you guys are doing, don't try not to add in the logic here. Just wherever it's necessary. Add more page objects if you need. As long as you keep hiding the ultimate algorithm, that's how you kind of maintain it. But ultimately, if you have to break it, then go ahead and break it, because sometimes if it's a one-off thing, you might end up doing it. But other than that, we're good to go. We're on a good pace. So Burma and Fado, you guys gotta pick it up with the Pokemon project. So definitely don't slack on that.
Right.
Yeah.
And reach out to me or Ish if you need help with it, because Ish is already done.
Yeah, this homework I think I could do, but I'm gonna spend most of the time on the Pokemon homework.
Yeah, because this should be more straightforward now. But yep.
Okay.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
All right, later.